Alors, bon après-midi tout le monde.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like to begin by telling you that today, for this sitting, we will be webcast, and that is why we are set up this way. And if I may, I would like to wish a warm welcome to the Statistics Canada team. In particular, we have Mr. Anil Arora with us today, Chief Statistician of Canada, Ms. Lynn Barr-Telford, who is Assistant Chief Statistician, Social, Health and Labor Statistics Sector, and Mr. Stéphane Dufour, Assistant Chief Statistician, Census, Regional Services and Operations Sector. There we are. And I would also like to remind my colleagues that we're going to use the last 10 or 15 minutes of the meeting to discuss committee business. We will carry on with the Statistics Canada now. You know, your witness accounts are very highly anticipated. And so you have about 10 minutes to give your presentation, after which committee members will ask you questions. So, Mr. Arora, over to you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First, I would like to thank committee members for having invited Statistics Canada to appear today in order to share with you the evolution of our work regarding enumeration of rights holders under Section 23 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Today I'm accompanied by my colleagues Lynn Barr-Telford and Stéphane Dufour, who will help me to answer your questions. The fact that I am accompanied by the Assistant Chief Statisticians reflects the importance that we attribute to this topic and to the opportunity for them to hear from you directly. Ms. Barr-Telford takes care of census content, and Mr. Dufour is in charge of census operations. Statistics Canada is dedicated to providing to political decision makers and data that are up to date and analyses of high quality. Meeting this objective helps us to build solid connections with partners, develop a world-class expertise, come up with robust methodologies to never stop innovating, and to explore innovative ways to meet Canadians' data needs.
And new emerging data sources and the census conducted once every 5 years to build, maintain, and further strengthen our data infrastructure in Canada. And this infrastructure reflects a support of our values, our laws, and societal needs with good facts and evidence. This evidence and need for unbiased data that is not influenced by factors other than statistical rigor and independence was made explicit through changes to the Statistics Act in 2017, subsequent to the return of the mandatory long-form census in 2016. Canadians, 88% in fact, say
88% of Canadians
rate, which lends further support for a strong and credible statistical system in Canada. Répondre aux besoins en renseignement.
Meeting our bilingual society's data needs, a society in which French and English have had official language status for 50 years, is something that we take very seriously at Statistics Canada. To our knowledge, no other statistics organization in the world has acquired a parallel expertise to our own, or has created such a rich wealth of information on such a vibrant society with 2 official languages as we have here in Canada. We are also dedicated to meeting the specific needs of linguistic rights holders, and this is a commitment that is extremely important to me. I would like to take a few minutes to show you, by describing you a few tangible measures that we have taken at Statistics Canada over the past years. how this is true. First, we stabilized funding for a Statistics Canada linguistic statistics program as laid out in 2019 budget, offering a cutting-edge expertise center for producing statistic analysis on Canada's official languages. We are able to support government measures on this topic. Our work support the Official Languages Action Plan and make it possible to provide high-quality information to official languages communities.
Experts through a formal advisory committee on language statistics to help guide our commitment to further strengthen our capacity to serve Canadians with the best information possible, the measure of right holders being an important focus. Given the specific requirements that define minority language rights holders both within and outside Quebec, we developed through robust qualitative testing a module of comprehensible questions in both languages to ensure that we could obtain a highly reliable count of right holders. To ensure that the questions designed through a qualitative testing would work to yield high quality and reliable results, we conducted a large-scale quantitative test with 135,000 households in 2019. Over the past many years, Statistics Canada has also strengthened its ability to obtain and maintain administrative data on school enrollments from other jurisdictions, including enrollments in minority language schools across this country. De plus, en collaboration avec le ministère.
Moreover, we collaborate with the Department of Canadian Heritage, and we have been able to develop geographic databases that make it possible to pinpoint where children of rights holders are living in Canada. Statistics Canada is thereby able to determine the distance between the place where the rights holders live and the geographic location of the school. Moreover, working together with the Department of Canadian Heritage and a number of other federal partners, we are working on developing a new post-census survey on Canada's minority official languages. This investigation will produce important contextual information on the intention of rights holders to teach their children in a minority language school. It will also show difficulties that minority language communities are faced with, including access to education in their official language.
That dates back to 1666 in Canada, and one that obviously has evolved since in content and methodology. It serves our nation's needs for high-quality data at low levels of geography for very small populations. It provides the statistical basis upon which numerous legal, statutory, and policy programs are assessed, and subsequent decisions are made to increase their effectiveness, including the Employment Equity Act, the Official Languages Act, the Canadian Human Rights Act, the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act, the Federal Provincial Fiscal Arrangements Act, and the Employment Insurance and Canada Pensions Act, just to name a few. Toutefois, le recensement fournit un instantané.
However, the survey, or rather the census, only paints a picture of a certain moment in time, and this regarding rights holders as well. It is important, therefore, to use an ecosystem of data. And it is through this lens that Statistics Canada is exploring different sources of data that will make it possible for Statistics Canada to paint a more complete picture on rights holders, including school resources in provinces and territories. And an investigation will be carried out regarding rights holders and the capacity to estimate the number of parents who plan on sending their children to a minority language school.
On school enrollments and the possible addition of a module of 5 questions on right holders and a post-census survey would immensely strengthen the information on this vital aspect of our bilingual society. Nous nous réjouissons à la perspective de continuer à travailler.
We're delighted at the idea to continue working with our partners to enrich this important ecosystem of data. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Aurora. You have really done that in record time, and we will be able to move on to the question period. First, I would like to invite Mr. Généreux to speak for 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses who are here today. We're happy to see you. That's the least we can say. My first question. I'm speaking about Statistics Canada. Are you an institution that is independent of the government? That is to say, you have your own advisory board? And how is it that you come up with questions to put into the survey, to the census, rather? We are a department, of course, with a minister. And we are independent in the sense that we control the methodology. That is to say, the decisions are our own. However, there is a process after 2017. After 2017, that process was to be more transparent in the decisions that we make at StatsCan. That is something that we do by default at our institution. I will repeat my question in another way. Do politicians order you to put certain questions in the census? The Statistics Canada Act gives approval to continue. That is the Cabinet's responsibility. The content is decided by the Cabinet. And after this, the Gazette will share with Canadians the content that was approved. In light of what you just said, or what you just read from your statement, I felt like saying, oh, the meeting is finished. Regarding the questions for rights holders in the short and long forms of the census, of the next census in Canada, can you speak to that? First of all, those questions have not been determined yet. As I said, the content under law is finalized by the Cabinet. We have carried out the test as I described in 2019. We carried out qualitative and then quantitative tests. Can the committee have access to the results of the qualitative and quantitative tests you carried out? Absolutely. We will make public the results of our tests. We are in the process of finalizing our tests. The results will be made public shortly, within the coming months. The next census will take place in 2020, in May 2021. And so the next census, that gives us 14 or 15 months, approximately. You said that this was an issue that's important to you, that those are your own words, not mine. So you consider that this is an important issue. You are at the head of Statistics Canada, and if you believe that this is important, can we hope, or can we consider that as part of the Census 2021, the questions that you have tested, or other questions regarding the census, regarding rights holders rather, will be included in the 2021 census? It's a very simple question. Could you answer it with a yes or no? As I said, the current system that we have under the law gives that decision to the Cabinet. So what you are telling me today is that the ball is in the Liberal government's court to decide whether or not minority language rights holders in Canada are important to them. Since this decision had already been approved to include in the census those questions in Census 2021, that decision had already been approved. The committee recommended that in a report that in the 2021 census you include those questions. I don't personally remember which witness came to tell us about that, but we were told We're going to carry out tests and we'll see what happens. You're telling me now that this is a cabinet decision, and so now I turn to my colleagues from the Liberal Party. At the end, are we going to end up including those questions on the 2021 census? The process is the following, and this is for every census. Yes, I understand. It's not just the process for 2021. It has been the process for decades. We carry out the tests, we carry out consultations, we do our own analysis. We are statisticians, we are not politicians. And so we do our best to test the content according to the priorities that were expressed and according to recommendations. That is something that Statistics Canada does for the cabinet and for our minister. I will repeat the question, Mr. Aurora. You said that this was important to you. Are you going to submit to the cabinet that the questions on rights holders be included in the 2021 census? We only have 2 seconds left. We will have the opportunity to come back to this, Mr. Généreux. Over the next 6 minutes, Mr. Arsenault has the floor. Thank you very much. I don't like to do this, but I'm going to pick up where my colleague left off. So what I've heard, Mr. Aurora, is that you are going to submit to the Government of Canada for the 2021 census that the enumeration of rights holders under the short form of the census, according to the Section 23 of the Charter. Yes or no? Mr. Aurora. Mr. Arsenault, we will give Mr. Aurora the opportunity to answer. I can only abide by the law and do what I may as chief statistician. This is a process that we follow every census. Well, thank you very much for your answer, Mr. Aurora. We will give our advice, but according to the law, the decision is the cabinet's. I have 6 minutes. What is your advice? You are aware that the advice that I'm giving is something that I can't really share. What were the results of the test that you carried out this summer, comparing the short and long form? Were the results positive? As I said, we are in the process of finalizing the results of the tests, and we are going to share the test results, including details, with the public shortly. It's something that's transparent. So are you going to read them? I understand. So are you going to share that after or before your recommendations? As I said, there's a part of analysis that we share with the government, and that is something that will be taken into consideration. That is going to be part of the analysis that the government will carry out. At Statistics Canada, we are ready to collect data from Canadians for a very important subject. This is not the first time that Statistics Canada gathers data. This has been the case for 50 years. Thank you. Thank you very much. We don't have much time here. You carried out tests on the rights holders. I want a sincere and honest answer, Mr. Aurora, because you said that this was important to you. Did the test results that you got on the short form of the census under Section 23, do they meet the Supreme Court's recommendations? As I said, we carried out the test. Yes or no?
J'ai déjà décrit le processus, la loi.
The law and our responsibility at StatsCan. We are going to follow the law. Do you agree? Well, we are the law here. We are the legislators. Mr. Aurora, we are asking you if you had test results on the short and long forms. And what you've heard and what you've seen so far, can we say that the results from on the short form meet the requirements from the Supreme Court in the Maillet decision. As I've said, we've done the test. We are going to finalize the results. We are going to give our best recommendation according to statistical science, and we are ready to collect information and to broadcast it. You've said the same thing 3 times. What you're saying is that you don't know the results from the test. We are finalizing the results from the test. The only reason why we are testing the content is to give advice to the cabinet. We are doing that they can make decisions according to the country's needs. Mr. Aurora, since this matters to you, do you understand that you are closed off and you're hiding information? And when you will advise the government of your suggestions, can you at least recognize that? We are ready to collect data. We are ready to put the questions on the census forms according to the law and according to the decision that the cabinet will make and according to the law that you created. We are ready to do the job that we do at StatsCan to give Canadians the best possible data, the best quality possible of data that meets the needs of rights holders. Do you have any caveats regarding the answers that you've obtained in the test that you conducted last summer? Do you have anything related to the court decision? Was anything problematic? We looked at the short and long forms and we are testing the results. The result that we will publish will give results from both forms. At StatsCan, we are ready to meet the needs of data users. This is why we exist. There have been many requests that we received. They came in, they trickled in, and in the current system, there are many requests. Some results are, there's a burden. Well, are there constitutional requests like the rights holders and the charter? I am sure that cabinet will take into account the needs of the law when they will finalize their decision. Thank you, Mr. Aurora. Mr. Arsenault's time is over. Mr. Beaulieu, you have the floor. The organizations that we've met told us that they need for StatsCan to evaluate rights holders per region, and that they do so through the short form. They've said that there would need to be 2 extra questions. Have you evaluated that aspect? We created a committee, an experts committee, to help us to formulate questions. The committee was highly involved in the process, in the testing process. They were also involved in the survey and the number of questions. According to the committee, well, their opinion was very important in our process. In the test that we conducted in 2019, we had a 5-question module that we tested. We tested the content on the short form and on the long form. As I've said, we are going to publish the results so that they're accessible to everyone. Why can't you publish them right now? Because we are finalizing the results and you're not done analyzing them. We are finalizing the analysis from our tests. It is going to be part of the decision. And the process and the act are also going to be part of the analysis and the decision that the cabinet will make. So when the results will be finalized, you will publish them. When will that happen? As I've said, it'll happen in a few weeks. In a few weeks, then you are going to formulate recommendations to cabinet. They are going to meet. Usually, when are you going to make that decision? The decision will be made by cabinet. This is according to the law. This is according to Article 21 of the Statistics Act. It is not a decision that I can make myself. It is a cabinet decision. We are going to respect cabinet's decision just as we've done for every single census. That means that we are meeting you too quickly because it would have been interesting to meet you once we would have the results on hand. Well, the results are going to be made public, and if you have questions, yes, everyone will have access. Yeah, absolutely. So at that time, we'll be able to have a debate. As I've said, we are devoted to meeting the needs of our users. This is our raison d'etre at Statistics Canada. There is a process and there is a law that we need to follow. And as legislators, as a committee, you have rules. Could you tell us, in case there is a test and there are questions on the short form, what would make it a good thing? What would be the favorable and disfavorable arguments? The arguments for or against? Thank you very much for the question. First, as I've said, there are currently many requests where StatsCan meets the requests, and we are doing so through data coming from long forms. We've been doing that for 50 years now. We've had the long form for 50 years, and it is given to citizens, and they fill it out themselves. The methodology that we use, that's the one we use to have high quality data. It is not something that is unique to Canada. It is the methodology that we use that is used everywhere in the world in countries that do the traditional census. It is also something that Canada does. For example, there is a program where we say that we're going to give $17 billion every year by using the data that comes from the census. There are many acts and many programs that rely on the high quality data that comes from the long form. This is something that we do. We have a methodology that is robust. We have a process that we've been using for 50 years now to get the best data possible. Without really getting into details and not really answering my question, well, from what I understand, you're talking about the reasons against this. You say that you receive a lot of requests for the long and short forms, but what makes a request relevant, and what are the arguments for? Because you haven't really, I'm not asking you to give us details, but let's say that the questions are tested on the short form. If we get a certain result, it will go ahead, and if we get another result, it would not be favorable. You have 20 seconds. First, it's about quality. If we can have quality. Second, there is the burden. Can citizens understand the survey when they will answer the survey? And there's also the cost associated with it. These are the factors that are taken into account. And there's also whether it has a negative impact on other questions. So these are the impacts that we take into account as statisticians to make the best possible decision. Thank you very much. Now, Monsieur Duval has the floor for 6 minutes.
You mentioned about the test results, but how many questions about right holders were tested?
So as I said, we put together a committee because we're not we have our statistical expertise, but we put together a committee of experts to help us with what is the most efficient way, what's the most effective way to collect this information, and that committee was very helpful in helping us formulate quantitative tests. In fact, when we started off with certain things, we thought it might work. We tested it, found out it didn't work. and we went back and retested other versions. And in the end, what we tested in the quantitative test, the test with 135,000 dwellings in Canada, was a module of 5 questions. And we think we're, as I said, we're in the final stages of assessing the quality, but we obviously think that we can get from those 5 questions a really good base on which to satisfy the needs of right holders in this country. As I've also said, that's one piece of the puzzle. We have to go further than that. I don't think that's alone going to do it, because the census is a one point in time exercise. And I think the needs of the users are really for an ongoing basis. So we've been working with partners at in other departments on a post-census survey that can get at not only what is that total number that we can get from the census, but how many intend to actually use the services. We're also working with administrative data sources and we already have some data that we get on an annual basis to say how many people are actually making use of that service. So if you look at some of the legal decisions that we've had, they've spoken to, the judges saying you need both, you need all these 3. You need the upper limit, you need how many are going to actually take use of that service, and what is that demand and how is it going to evolve over time. And Statistics Canada wants to work on actually developing the infrastructure that is going to be needed for this country, not just in 2021, but on an ongoing basis, so that we can meet the needs of users, not just once, but on an ongoing basis.
So, Mr. Aurora, would any of the questions by any departments, any stakeholders, were there any objections to any of those questions?
Well, as I said, we formed an advisory committee of experts that represents different viewpoints, and I think what we found was that that's the module that will get us the highest quality data that responds to the data need that we have.
But was there any objections from any?
I'm not aware of any objections. I think those questions were well received.
So is the committee still functioning? Have they been meeting on a regular basis, or?
Yeah, they do meet on a regular basis, and we continue to use their expertise both as a committee, but also dealing with members. Yes.
So you mentioned that the test results were to be done shortly. So can you define what is shortly to us, an estimated time?
Yeah. So as I've said before, we certainly we're not going to test things and just hold the results for ourselves. The testing is there. The results are going to be transparent. We're in the final stages of putting the report together. As I've said before, that report becomes a part of the considerations for what is the final content that Cabinet is going to have to make. So the report will come out as soon as the decisions are made public about what is the content that's going to be on the 2021 census.
And when? When is shortly?
I don't know when Cabinet's going to convene and actually have the conversation. I'm sure that once it's done and the questions are gazetted a lot as well with the law, it'll be shortly after the gazette.
Okay, so let me ask you, when do you plan on sending your recommendations to Cabinet?
Well, I mean, it's part of the process. It
doesn't answer my question. I'm asking. Okay. There was a question that was asked in the House today. Very, very important. Yeah. And the answer we got back from the government, it kind of concerns me, because they're putting it in your lap, saying that you guys are working on it. They're waiting for it. So we need to know, this committee, when those recommendations going to Cabinet will be done.
Yeah. Look, I want you to know that I don't set Cabinet dates. I don't set, when these meetings happen. All I know is, when that schedule gets set, we're ready with our set of recommendations, and we'll be ready. So we're ready to collect the information and provide the information to users. And that's what we do. That's what our job is.
So don't you send a report with the recommendations so that the Cabinet can read it?
No, the
prior
report
to having their meeting.
No, we will take the kernel of our analysis. As I said, we're still in the process of finalizing the report, but we will certainly be inputting our bottom line results as part of the decision for Cabinet to make.
So does Cabinet? Could Cabinet ask Stats Canada to modify their recommendations?
Look, we do what we do best, which is statistics. And so our recommendations are based on sound statistical methodology, something that we've been using for decades. And so our recommendation is always going to be based on, will this set of questions respond to the needs of users, and will it give good quality data that meets the user's needs? That's our consideration. That's what we will put in obviously for consideration by cabinet members.
So okay, thank you.
Alors, nous allons donc passer à Monsieur.
We are going to on to Mr. Godin for the next 5-minute round. Only 5, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Aurora, thank you to the colleagues who are with you. Mr. Aurora, I am going to try a different path. For me, Statistics 337, my course at college, that's really far behind me. I'm going to ask you a question. If we want to have a true picture of a particular situation for a specific population, what is the way to figure that out?
Dépêchez-vous à me répondre, là.
Hurry up and answer.
No, it's because it really is dependent on a number of factors. Statistical sampling is a very solid method, and I speak in general here, to get at a particular aspect that we're trying to study. And I'll just give you one example. So we do the unemployment rate every single month. We collect.
En fait,
if I may,
Aurora, je vais vous
Mr. Aurora, I am going to cut you off right now because we have very little time. Me, as a person, if I want to have a picture of the situation, I am going to knock on every door, I'm going to take a notepad, and I am going to write it down. That's the best method, and we can't do that. Now, we are using science through statistics. What is the best way to have the most accurate picture to understand the situation of minorities and rights holders in Canada, statistically speaking? As I've said, for us, we do surveys, and we do them all the time. I was just describing that we do surveys for people who are unemployed, and we do that every month with 56 million households. Science, statistics, enables us to have high-quality data by using surveys. So this is not always a census. We don't do a census every single month. It's not pragmatic to do so. Science shows that we can have high-quality data. High-quality data for official languages is something that we've been doing with the census on the long form since 1981. I'm going to stop you right now. You talked about the long form. Now I'm asking you this question. If you put the questions about right holders in the short and long forms, do you believe that the picture, if I may use the English expression, will be more accurate? First of all, as I've said, there are currently many different requests. It's a very simple question. You have a long form for 25% of the population, and 75% of them will have a short form. I want to know, if I take a 100% survey that has all the questions, or a 25% survey, which one is more accurate? Which one is most realistic?
As I said, there are surveys, there are samples where the data comes from the samples, and they are absolutely of high quality, and they are representative of the current situation and the population. It's not something theoretical. It is something that we do every month. That's great. I just want to add to this, and I'm going to ask you something different after. What you just confirmed, you are right about that for a territory where everything is the same. But in certain territories, not everything is the same. And so I am convinced, and you can argue against me, that if we put in 100% of the census the questions on the rights holders, that we will have a more reflective picture than if we only do it for 25%. Today, the innovation minister responded to my colleague. He said that he wants to find the best ways of gathering quality data in order to enumerate rights holders. So what I understand is that the minister, who is an authority on Statistics Canada, wants to find the best methods. I believe that the best way is to put it on 100% of the census. So I think we can adjourn the meeting today and say that the next census in 2021, 100% of the census will have questions on rights holders. 5 seconds, Mr. Aurora. We'll have the chance to come back to this on another question period. Try not to ask questions that are too long, please, because it makes the answers too short. We're going to move on to Mr. Sanson for 5 minutes. Thank you very much for being here. I'm going to be very quick. You received all the questions in front of you. Please go to page 7. On page 7, there were 5 questions that were added. And so, Mr. Aurora.
And I'm going to meet the needs of the community. So let's keep that in mind as we go. So let's do the questionnaire. Simple. Let's go to page 7, number 12. You all have that in English in front of you. I believe you have that, Mr. Aurora, as well. So let's start with Mr. Godet. Mr. Godet, answer question 12. Is your house in Quebec? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Gone. You're going to question 16. Don't even do the other question I asked you. The next question. Question 13. Did you go to a French school or immersion? Mr. Chong, did you go to a French school immersion? Yes or no? No. Gone. There goes 70, 80, 95% of Canadians don't have to answer all those questions. So now the argument, 2 arguments. The argument that we bring forward, which is that the test is too long and they won't take it seriously, not true. And on top of that, when you do it online, you're not even going to see it. 99% of the people in 5 years will be doing it online. You won't even see question 14, 15, 16. They're gone. So the argument that the test is too long, short, not at all acceptable. Second of all, when we say the soda is 25%, I can tell you that when you're focusing on one zone, looking at the number of kids, as my colleague has said, the best way to do it is to do each and every one of them. And I know it. I lived it for 13 years as superintendent of French schools in Nova Scotia. And I was president across Canada of the French school superintendents. And I can tell you that we're crying every day. This is the most important things that we could deliver as a government to make sure that we're reaching all Canadians to get the answer we need. So is it too long? We can get rid of that. They're gone, those questions. Now let me go to the next one. Let's go to page 9 on that questionnaire. Now, as upset as I was there, I'm now stupefied. I'm now gone. Here is what it says. Reasons why we asked the question. So we're saying reasons why. Just follow the yellow. So for the question 2 and 7 that you've been asking for years and years and years, 2 and 7, you're saying the reason you're doing this, asking those questions, because we want to make sure that the municipalities that are planning a variety of services, such as schools. Oh no! The majority of English people in Canada has always been able to receive the information of how many people will go to school, how many schools we have to build. And can you believe it? It's hard to believe that in this great country that the French people and the English people in Quebec cannot have that. So we have the question, it says from 12 to 17 of this is for the Charter of Rights and Education. We're not even meeting the rights, and now we're not meeting the education information. The only place it can be is in the short one. Now, I also want to bring you to question 10. That question 10 that's been there for years is a great question, but it's only ever asked one category of 3. The other 2 categories were never asked, and guess what? There's more and more every day of category 2 and 3 than there is of 1. Because it's the parents that took the education. It's the kids taking the education. So we're so far from getting the information we require. Now you could say we can put it in the long one or the short one, 25%. I already put that one aside. You shouldn't do that based on that. But even if you did, on the long survey, you know what happened? Did the long survey ever become optional in this country?
1 minute.
Quick, yes or no? Yes, it did. Did it not?
So
Did the long survey, simple question, did the long survey, was it ever optional?
It was obviously made optional.
Was that under the Harper government? Yes or no?
It was under that.
Thank you. So if another government came in tomorrow morning and you put it in the long one, and they made it optional, what was the result when you made it optional? Was there an increase or a decrease in people filling that survey?
Well, obviously there was a decrease.
Increase or decrease? You know, you're a statistic. You know the facts.
And also the language questions were moved from, at that point, from the long to the short because it was no longer mandatory.
Yeah. But did you ever do a survey to see, this is what my community is asking me, did you ever do a survey to see the prejudice that not having those questions on survey has had on the Cajuns and Francophones and English people in Quebec? Have you ever done a survey on that? Have you ever done a survey on the provinces that do want to help French and outside of Quebec and the English? Have you ever, did they know exactly, and they cannot fulfill that because you're not giving them the information. And you said, I'm coming back to what you said, my heart is in it, my heart is in it,
Yeah.
and you said, I want to meet the needs. When you consulted that committee, did they tell you they wanted that in the short survey, yes or no?
Monsieur Sanson, nous allons revenir.
Mr. Sanson, we'll come back to you at another turn. I'm sorry. Time has really run out, so we'll move on to Mr. d'Entremont to continue on this subject. It's my first experience as a committee member. I thought, official languages, that'll be interesting, but a bit boring. It is not boring at all. I love seeing Mr. Sanson and Mr. Arsenault speak. What I really want to know is at what point in the process are you? You are saying, in theory, the testing is done. We are waiting on the cabinet to make a decision. What is the timeline at this point? Firstly, I'm very pleased to see that the questions as we drafted them reduce the burden and they will provide high-quality data. And so thank you very much, Mr. Sanson. The second thing, as I said, is that there is a process where we already carried out our qualitative and quantitative testing. That is to say, we have already gathered the data, and we are in the process of analyzing the results in order to formulate the recommendations under the law for Cabinet so that they can make a decision respecting the law. And it will be based on statistical science. I think that you carried out the analysis of data that you already had. I think that the data is ready, that you already have an idea how it went. You are almost ready to submit it to Cabinet. As we heard from Mr. Baines today, the Cabinet is ready for you to bring that to the Cabinet. And so is that going to work? Is it going to be included in the 2021 census? That is exactly the process. The only thing that I can say in reply is that firstly, we are ready. This will be the first time. After the decision, this will be the first time with the 5 questions. Never before have we put those questions in the census. So this will increase the amount of data, the level of accuracy, how detailed it will be. It has never been done before. This will be the first time. Secondly, as I said, that is not the only thing we will do at Statistics Canada. We are ready to work with our partners on a post-census survey. Thirdly, we will make an effort to favor administrative data. For us, it's really an ecosystem of data. And the need is going to be there after 2021. So what we are doing is really building a system that will be there for our users long after the 2021 census. Okay, so really the question is the following. Will the questions be in the census? We have the short form and the long form of the census. The long form goes to 25% of the population. That's the short form. Rather, the long form, we're looking at the long versus the short form. So right now, the question for the government is, are those questions going to be in the short census? Your question? Will the questions be in the short form? We have one census in Canada that includes 2 questionnaires, the short questionnaire and the long questionnaire, which is more detailed. Both are mandatory. That is the definition of a census. The fact that we use a detailed questionnaire for a sample of households systematically is a characteristic of our census. But the quality of data, as I said, and I reiterate and emphasize this, you as decision makers, you who are so important to Canadians, for us, it is very important to provide to you the data that you need to make your own decisions. On a number of subjects, and our concern for us is how are we going to provide you with high quality data? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Aurora. Now we will move on to the next 5-minute question period. It will be shared between 2 members. First, Ms. Lambropoulos. You can begin. Thank you.
Couple of questions. I'm from Quebec. I'm an Anglophone from Quebec, and I noticed the questions that are in your survey, that are in the census so far, only question 16 and 17 are, did this person do any of their primary school or secondary school in an English language school in Canada? Obviously, this excludes the grandparent clause, and obviously in Quebec, we're allowed to send our kids to a school even if the parent didn't go to an English school, but the grandparent did. Is there any way of including some type of question to ensure that all right holders and to ensure that we get an actual number of eligible students that would be able to go to the school?
I mean, that's our intent with the test, the questions that we've tested, is to make sure that we get, for very small regions, the quality of the information, the numbers that we need to make sure that we have a good sense of the number of right holders. It's obviously that's our intent. That's what that module was built and designed and tested to do, and it is to ensure that we have that. Now, the second part, as I keep saying, isn't just, what is that total eligible population, if you like, but it's also to go further than that and say, how many would actually take advantage of that? Because it's not one or the other, you need both. Mm-hmm. And then what we need to do is also to make sure how many people are actually going and where are they going and what are the distances. So it's all those 3 things that we want to try to work at it. This will be the first time in the census, if, once, as I've explained many times, once a decision is made to include these questions on the census, that kind of quality and detail of information will be there for all users. And our aim is to continue to work with stakeholders, work with you to make sure that information is kept up to speed and that we continue to strengthen it and continue to add to it over time.
Okay, and would these types of questions be included in both the short and the long form survey?
Well, as I've said, this is one, and I'm speaking in general here, okay, because that's the heart of this debate, is that the question that's being asked is, can we give good quality information at low levels of geography, from a sample survey, okay, or from the 1 in 4 sample part of, and I'm saying there are so many programs already in Canada that use that information to make important decisions, where it isn't just a homogeneous population; it's a heterogeneous or homogeneous. We do that. That's what we do all the time. That is something that's what the science of the statistical rigor is. We want to make sure that we provide that detailed information to everybody. And the last point I'll make is that and if you think that's theory, I was just asking colleagues, how many times did people go to those local levels And we had over 12 million visits to our census profiles that provide information at that very local level. So we know we're providing it, we know it's of high quality, and we know Canadians are consuming it.
But when provinces then counter that and say, well, we don't have an exact number because we're not following the 25% of people that have been surveyed, they have no recourse afterwards, right? So that, I think that's the main problem here, and that's why we're all fighting for the short form census, because this would give provinces the ability, or stakeholders, people, the ability to go and fight the province and say, no, this is the exact number of people that are eligible.
So,
you know?
First of all, there are many programs where there's a need for very high quality data. Okay, the unemployment program, I've given that as one example that we benchmark from the census to our ongoing surveys. So there's a lot of programs, employment equity. There are many legal requirements that are based on what is the long form. I'm here what I'm trying to tell you is that we do not want to inadvertently leave Canadians with the impression that the information that comes from the long form is untrustworthy or is not of high quality or is not is not something you can trust at low levels of geography. What I'm trying to explain is that this is something in Canada we have done for 50 years on a whole host of areas, and that information is not theoretical. It's something that we provide it to you as legislators, as decision makers, and you make important decisions already on a whole host of laws based on that quality of information. And I'll just leave you with the last point. If, in fact, that information was not reliable, what we would see are huge variances in the results from one census to the other for those local levels, and we don't. It is something that is, and it's not we're not the only country that uses a sample to do the census to provide high quality data at low levels. It is something that the world over, it's a sampling technique that provides very high quality. 3.7 million Canadians fill out the long form, and the quality of the information is very high. That's all I'm trying to say.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. C'est tout le temps qu'on...
Thank you. This is all the time that we have. Mr. Beaulieu, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes. Thank you. I thought that I would ask my question related to, well, outside of the rights holders topic. The question that I had for you was about 2005, when people could give multiple answers, for example, about the language used at home. If people said English and French, half of them would get sent to the English side and half would be sent to the French side. If people gave another language, it would be divided by 3. In 2016, you've analyzed the data so that people who say English and French count on the English and French sides and for foreign language speakers. That means that compared to 2011, when there was 81.2% Francophones who used French at home, according to StatsCan, we went to 87% of Francophones who use French at home in Quebec, according to your results. For Anglophones, there was an increase to 19%. For foreign language speakers, it increased to a quarter, and that gave us about 121%. Why did you make that change in your methodology for analysis? If I understand your question, the opportunity to have multiple answers is not uniquely related to this question. This is here for multiple other questions. We can be in a situation where there is more than one answer. The question is, how do we deal with this, and how that's related to the matter of rights holders? If a person wants to give French as their answer, we will use that. And we'll say that this meets our objective. So there is an order that we follow to determine whether the answer is going to count or not. As I've said, when we have multiple answers, if one of them is French, then That's already one of the characteristics. This is all the time that we have. Thank you, Mr. Duval.
Go.
Mr. Aurora, the actual questions, I guess everybody's trying to ask, is are the same questions going to be put on the short form and the long form? Because you're talking about high quality data. So how do you get high quality data if you're missing 25% of answers?
So, first of all, as I've explained, and I think this is, I'll just repeat what I said before. I'm very concerned if people think that any of the data, through that logic that you put, that comes from the census long form is missing 75% of the responses. Or that it is not of good quality. Because you as legislators, you make decisions on a whole host of programs based on the quality of the data that we get from the long form. And I think it is, I cannot explain it, strongly enough. We know the population, we know the total population, and it is a systematic sampling technique that is used the world over, where every fourth household with a random start, with a mandatory requirement, fills out a whole host of questions that are on the long form. And when we get those responses, we have weighting techniques to make sure that that one house that says yes or no represents the other four and that region. And that is how we come up with the full population. So it's not that the 75% are missed, it's that if you get selected in a very statistically sound manner to fill out the question, you are representing that whole area. And that is a method by which we can ask questions of one person, and that response essentially represents others. It's like, I don't want to make light of this, but we don't drain the entire transmission oil to find out whether it's good or not. We take a sample of it and say, yeah, it's of good quality, and then it's either time to change it or not. So the sampling technique is something that is germane to statistics. So to ask a question and that response essentially serves as a donor to the rest of the population is what we do all the time.
Nous allons passer à une.
Thank you. We are going to go to round 3 for questions. We now have 5 minutes. I'm going to start with Mr. Généreux. Mr. Aurora, what you just said is true, but what you're not saying is that the way that the samples give results is that in reality it's good for you, but for the Supreme Court of Canada and for rights holders, it's not good. That's the reality. Unfortunately, the FCFA, that was one of our guests this week, they were there 2 days ago, and all the other witnesses that we met, they all said the same thing. All of the communities who are in a minority situation in Canada are unable to get their rights recognized as rights holders because we don't have the right data to get an idea of the situation. And when they go to the Supreme Court, they go to the Supreme Court every single time to fight for their rights. And it's because of the statistical data. So we are asking you to collect the necessary statistics, because what we think, and tell us if you don't think that it's the case, but we think that that data should be collected on both the short and long form. We can't do that on just the long or short form. So tell us why we're wrong to think that way. Users gave us their requests and the courts have made decisions. There are 3 elements that are necessary. First, what is the population as a whole in the region, meaning in the universe? Second, how many of them are going to use the service? And third, what changes are going to happen in the population? the judge was very clear in his decision. He said that these were the 3 necessary aspects to meet the needs from users. As for us, we are going to use all 3 aspects while working with the population. Yes, of course we can. That's something, as I've said, we are devoted to collect high quality data about the total population. And we are going to do that with a post-census survey for the population that is going to use the service and the administrative data. So these are the 3 necessary elements. So you're saying that the Supreme Court said that these 3 elements were necessary. So why is it that during previous consensuses we could not do that in order to help build schools in minority situations? Second question, how come in your process, in the analysis that you're going to make, what are the recommendations that you're going to formulate to the department in the next few weeks or few months to say that we need to do the census in both long and short forms? What are you going to tell Mr. Baines? What are your recommendations going to be? Obviously, we are going to formulate recommendations that will enable us to gather high quality data that meet the needs that were expressed. That's our objective. I don't understand why we would formulate a recommendation that would not be within that scope. That is always our objective. We want to have high quality data. I am going to repeat what I said earlier. The final decision, will it be to put the question in the short or long forms and do these decisions? Are you going to formulate a recommendation to Mr. Baines? As I've said, according to the law, this decision is a cabinet decision. Our job is to figure out how to have questions that enable us to have high quality data. So if I understand properly, because I'm trying to properly comprehend what you're saying, you are saying that the elements that are in the form and the 3 questions that should meet the Supreme Court's decision, they're already in the system. Is that what you're saying? They're already in the form. The only reason why we tested all 5 questions was because it wasn't done before. And after the decision, it's going to be the very first time that we are going to ask that question. It is the first time. We've never done that before. Thank you very much. Ms. Atanzio, 5 minutes.
So this afternoon, very important question. So I'm going to go straight to the heart of the matter in terms of the legality. So it seems as though the Stats Canada has been testing the patience of Canadians, perhaps members of this committee also, and those of the official language minority communities. So the Stats Can realized that it is potentially exposing itself to the risk of being sued by the official language minority communities for the repeated omission to survey and to record all 3 of the categories of Section 23. Are you aware of that?
We are committed to providing good data to Canadians. That is our sole objective.
I understand.
And that's what we will do.
We are at the crux right now to be able to historically, and I'm going to put emphasis on that, to be able to get precise data, to be able to help the crying needs of minority communities across the land.
We're confident that once the decisions are made, that we will provide data of high quality. It is not the first time that we will provide data of high quality. We have always done that.
But there's been an omission.
I will argue we're one of the best in the world,
Sir,
and we will bring that expertise of all our 6,000 people as Statistics Canada.
The quality that has been given thus far has only focused on one group of individuals in virtue of Section 23. I'm not the first to be able to tell you that. You've been doing this over the course of the last 7 census. We are at a point right now, the crux, where we have this opportunity to be able to remedy a situation that has gone far too long. And there's a crying need. So my question to you is, do you agree that if we do not address this pressing need today, that we are exposing ourselves to lawsuits? Yes or no?
I will once again emphasize, we would not have stabilized our program for official languages. We would not have done rounds and rounds of qualitative testing. We would not have had an administrative, a committee of experts. We would not have subjected a module of 5 questions to 135,000 households if we weren't serious about meeting the needs of this very important group. And I think that's not lost on Cabinet, that when we've done all this work, we're going to give our best advice based on our statistical expertise. And at the end of the day, as I say, once this decision is made, it will be the first time in Canada that we will have had a module of 5 questions with very high quality data for very low levels of geography, and that's not enough. I think we're going to have to go even beyond that. And Statistics Canada is more than prepared to continue to work, to do post-census surveys, to go to administrative data, because as I keep repeating, you do the census in May 2021, the information is out of date essentially the day after you collect it, but it serves as a good benchmark for us to continue that process.
So I understand that.
So we need to do more than that.
Yeah. So I understand. I'm sorry to cut you off. So I understand because time is limited and I want to maximize as much as I possibly can. So I understand from your answer then that there could be a possibility that this time around your suggestion or your recommendation would be to be able to include those questions now that we've never done before to be able to address this pressing problem. Is that my understanding? You're saying that you could do more, but for the time, you seem to be on page and saying, perhaps, yes, we're going towards including these other 2 subsections of 23 that we have not in the past. In the short
I'll
form.
just repeat what I've said, which is we
All
would
right.
not have gone to all those extents and tested and subjected 135,000 households if there was no intent to include that as a recommendation.
I'm a rookie on this committee. I'm newly elected. Just by profession, a lawyer. I've just been practicing 29 years, and I know that when I'm in a court of law, experts are called to be able to give their opinions. They are not bound by any confidentiality. They're not bound by any secrecy. Courts want to hear from the expert. So you're the expert here today. So in your opinion, both the federal government and Stats Canada has an obligation to put in place positive measures to be able to help their minority communities. Would you not agree that incorporating these other 2 subsections of 23 would be a positive step and a positive move for all the minorities concerned across the land? As an expert, what would be your answer?
First of all, we do get called in front of courts to defend our methodology. We would be more than happy to do that.
So would it be
aspect
would it be yes?
if called upon.
But would it be yes? Would you agree?
Merci.
Thank you. We have to move on to the next period. So, Mr. Entremont, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to share my time with Mr. Godin.
Small community of 3,000 people. Let's say there's 100 people in there that are ayant droit. What are the possibilities of Stats Canada missing those 100 people in the methodology that they have today? Will you capture those small numbers that we're really trying to tease out of it so that we can build a school or we can build a community center or do those kinds of things?
And the answer is yes. That's what we do, not just for this, this variable, an important variable, an important topic, an important aspect of our law and our society. We do this for so many other needs, whether it's hospitals, whether it's the fire station, whether it's businesses. This is why we do this, surveys and why we do the census. That's exactly why we do it. So we feel very confident in that, and it's not something that's theory. As I said, 12 million page views at the very small levels of our census profiles from the 2016 census to date. It's not a theory. This is what happens today.
Okay, no, I'm just trying to see how you hit those very small pockets in a lot of
Yeah.
cases when you have this very broad census program, and you're not hitting everybody, you're only
That's
hitting
the
a certain
that's the
component of-
value of the census, and that is what no other survey, gets down to those very low levels of geography.
So in cases you're going to get zero is what's going to
Well,
really happen.
So so just if I may, you asked a question. In very, very small communities where, let's say, the number is less than 10, and it's a statistical, technique that is used the world over, we would, to protect the privacy of the very small numbers of people that are there, it would be either rounded to 0, 5, or 10. So if it was 8, it would either be, through a routine, either be 5 or 10. But that's kind of the rounding that we do. Other than that, the numbers are available for very small communities.
Okay, I know we're out of town, so the time, so.
Merci, cher collègue.
Thank you, dear colleague. I am going to pretend that everyone around this table who sits on this committee wants to have the questions on 100% of the surveys. Now, here's my question. How much time do we have left before it's too late for us to put the questions on the form for 2021, for 2021 census? We are in a situation where we are going to formulate a recommendation and wait for a cabinet decision. So the time is now. So what you're saying is that we had a few weeks before sending it to cabinet. And how long does cabinet have to make a decision before adding the questions or instructing StatScan to put the specific questions on the 2021 census? So how many days or months are there left before the forms get printed? We are currently preparing for the census, but you're waiting for cabinet instructions. You can't act until the cabinet hasn't given you the go. So how long does cabinet have at most to say, go, we are putting this question on all forms, both short and long? As I've said, the census will happen in May 2021, but I want a number, Mr. Aurora. It takes time to print the forms, but StatsCan has been doing this for 50 years. So what is the maximum amount of time that we have left? A few weeks, which means that the minister can, a few weeks before the census is launched, to say, let's go ahead, let's put it on 100% of the forms. The time that, well, this is something that we do every 5 years. It is not a great surprise. It is the same schedule that we are going to follow for 2021 that we've been following before. So allow me, Mr. Aurora, to... so that means that if the minister wants to have a complete picture about right holders, they will only have a few weeks left to say no, which means, so it's going to be in May 2021, which means that we can say before April 1st, 2021, he can say yes, no, unfortunately not. We need to have the decision much earlier than that. But how long do we have? A few weeks? No. A few weeks from now. How long does the minister have? I am going to ask my colleague to answer. You understand the question? So the person responsible for operations. According to our operational procedures, if we don't start printing before the end of the month of July 2020. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. So we are going to move on to Mr. Arsenault.
5 minutes still. Thank you, Mr. Aurora. What would be the point of doing the short form? As I said, the census, there is one census with a short form and a long form. The number of people, that is the Canadian population, what is the objective? It's to determine the number of people, the Canadian population, for each of the small regions. And why couldn't you do it with the long form? I'm asking you, what is the objective of the short form? And I'm answering to have the best count. Why do you say the best count? To have the exact population for all regions, because there are thousands of dollars that get transferred to the provinces and communities. Thank you very much. So it's to have a better count, a more precise count. Thank you very much for your answer. If you haven't already said what your recommendation is, we can all guess what it would be. Schools have come to see us. School boards from Francophone situations everywhere across the country have come to see us. We take their demands seriously. We say that the short form is more accurate. You just said it yourself. We need the short form to have a more precise count, a more precise estimate. Well, they're the same as you. They think exactly the same thing. My question is the following. Unanimously, all of the stakeholders who are very important to you all tell us the same thing. You need to use the short form. The question is very simple, and I would ask that you answer with a simple answer. Please just answer with a yes or no. Am I right in saying that our minister, when our minister will make the decision to enumerate the rights holders under Section 23 of the Charter, either on the short form or the long form, that it would not be unreasonable for the government to use the short form? Am I right to think that? I have already answered quite a few times. Yes or no? Am I right to say that it is not unreasonable for the government, in the case that I just explained, to choose the short form? Yes or no? The decision is for the cabinet to make. Is it unreasonable? I use the word unreasonable for the government to choose a short form. Yes or no? Our jurisdiction, our purview. No, I'm speaking about the government, Mr. Aurora. If I could answer, no, you never answer the question. The question is simple. With what I just explained to you, with what you told us about the short form, am I right in saying that it is not unreasonable for the government, according to what you just said, that the short form would be the better solution? We are statisticians. For us, we take care of science, methodology, statistics, and we are going to provide our best opinion. And at the end of the day, it's the government, it's you, it's the cabinet who makes the decision. Why? Why with your science, Mr. Aurora? With all of the experience that you have, all of the stakeholders that you've heard, because you sent someone here last Tuesday to listen to what they said to us. Why are you incapable of answering this simple question that is so important to the stakeholders? My question is simple. I will repeat it. Am I right in thinking that it is not unreasonable for the government, in this case, to choose the short form to enumerate the rights holders? With your science, with your expertise, I understand very well how important this issue is. We are dedicated. We are really devoted to providing high-quality data. Mr. Chair, the witness is not answering the question. It is very unpleasant, Mr. Aurora. Mr. Arsenault, please. Mr. Aurora, you have 30 seconds left to complete your intervention. Go ahead, Mr. Aurora. We are really prepared, in respect of the law, to gather the data, to work with stakeholders, to establish and maintain a system. That is what our country really needs for a very large population, and we are ready to really do our best. That is our goal, to provide the data. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Aurora. Mr. Arsenault? No, I'm sorry. I need to move on. Mr. Beaulieu, for 2.5 minutes, please. I'm happy to be asking questions on rights holders, but you're telling us that you haven't finished analyzing the tests and that we'll be able to meet you when you are ready. I'm going to ask you a question on the way you organize the multiple choice questions. Your answer was not clear. before, when someone answered either English or French, you counted the answer as them being either Francophone or Anglophone. Now both are counted, and you've seen the figures. When there's a participant who answers in French, you count them as Francophone. And so this is to increase the proportion of each linguistic group. That's what I've understood. Well, I answered that there are various questions where there are multiple answers. That's reasonable. However, specifically pertaining to rights holders, when someone says, yes, the language is French, according to the 3 criteria, my question wasn't pertaining to rights holders. But I can ask another question that I had. Just up until 1993, it was shown that about 70% of people who had French roots spoke English at home. It showed a cumulative assimilation. And after 1993, you added in the Canadian category. And that completely mixed up the data. We can't have any idea anymore because no matter what our linguistic roots are, everyone can reply Canadian. And so why did you do that? Would it be possible to go back and adopt a method that would make it possible for us to assess that? You're speaking about matters of ethnicity, and the form is based on the proportion of Canadians and the answer that they give us. And so it reflects the results from the prior census, and the ethnic aspect changes significantly over the years. So the fact that Canadian was one of the examples on the census reflects the results from the previous questionnaire. Thank you very much, Mr. Aurora, Mr. Beaulieu. Mr. Duval, 2.5 minutes, please.
Mr. Aurora, one thing, I know you're on the hot seat, and I want to thank you, all of you, for coming here, but you've really confused me. You have really done a good job.
Well, let's see if I can fix it up.
Okay. I asked you earlier about when you're going to ask or put the recommendations to Cabinet. You told me that, if I remember correctly, you told me that we don't know, maybe a couple shortly, maybe a couple weeks, whatever. The gentleman down there, my colleague, asked when could they provide the questions or they want to change questions. You're saying a couple weeks. It sounds like to me that this is already going to be browned and determined what's going to be on the census forms. And you're going to send it to Cabinet, and they have no other choice but to accept it. And if they do it for the next one over. That's what I'm hearing here, because I'm getting really different answers. And it's very frustrating that I asked questions earlier, my colleague asks his questions now, and I'm kind of getting really, really different points. And then this gentleman here, Mr. DeFore, kind of even said something even further to say, okay, maybe we can do it in the summer. You don't know when the Cabinet dates are. So what is it? I'm just, help me out here.
Yeah, so let me see if I can just clarify it. As you said, the decision about what ultimately, the content that ultimately lands on the census questionnaire is a decision that's made by Governor and Council, by Cabinet, and then subsequent to that decision is gazetted, 30 days, give or take, after that decision is made. We are in the last stages because obviously the census is coming up, so it's going to be very shortly that the government's going to have to make that decision about what is the ultimate content on the census. And that's not something new. That's, there's every 5 years we do the census. It's about this time, give or take, that they make the decision on the questionnaire. And we're in, obviously Statistics Canada, based on the testing that we've done, gives our best advice okay, as to what works or not on through our testing, through qualitative testing, through the advisory committee that we put together, through the quantitative testing that we've done, and it's ultimately cabinet that says, okay, this is a question that we want on this is the content of the census question, and then we carry it out. Okay, so that process hasn't changed, and I'm sorry if there's any confusion, but that's the process, and that's where we're at this stage, and that's why I assume we're here.
So just okay.
Voilà, je voulais dire que nous, étant donné.
I just wanted to say that given the time, we were going to do a fourth round, but with 2 minutes per party. That way, Mr. Aurora will be able to answer the questions. And so first, I will begin with Mr. Généreux for 2 minutes, please. Mr. Aurora, I don't really know where to begin, but I put myself in people's shoes. People who are listening to us today, people who will listen to your witness account. Those people are going to notice that as an expert, and I quite liked what Ms. Latanzio said earlier concerning the fact that she's a lawyer, and when it comes to experts, experts must give their opinion. And Mr. Arsenault asked you your opinion. He asked you for your opinion on whether it would be unreasonable for the government to choose to include the questions in the short form, and you didn't answer the question. You are an expert in this matter, and so are your colleagues. And as parliamentarians, we're asking you these questions because we are legislators. We are here to write up laws and to enforce them. And you are incapable of answering a question that I found quite simple. And you said that rights holders across Canada are important to you, but you are not answering. Why don't you just want to answer? Why won't you just simply answer yes or no, whether or not the cabinet should make one decision or another?
Is something that the courts ask us, not every day, but from time to time. We go, we defend that advice, and we defend our sampling methods. Regardless of what decision gets made on this, we will be there to provide our best statistical advice and stand up for the quality of the data that we provide.
OK, mais vous comprenez que les gens, ça fait des dizaines.
Okay, but for decades, people have needed to have data to have access to services in their communities. You're telling me that when the Supreme Court calls on you to be a witness, you just answered us, but you wouldn't be able to answer to a department or a minister, you should do this or that thing.
Quality of the data that Canadians need and that you as legislators need to make important decisions. We have done that for decades, and we will continue to do that, sir.
Merci, Monsieur Sanson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sanson, for 2 minutes.
We know statistically it's very important, and you do a good job. We're not about this. All that we want to know is, when I went through a few minutes ago the survey, is it true that most people will only have to answer one of the 5 questions because of the added questions, because it's not for them? So is it going to take a lot longer to answer the short survey with those 5 questions because only 5% is going to answer them all? Because they don't apply. Is it true that it only applies to a small group of entitled parents?
We've designed the questionnaire as was administered, to your point, in 2019, to make sure that we keep the burden to a minimum. And I think you proved it in quite eloquent terms that it works.
Very good. So it's not going to be, we can't say it's going to take too long or people are going to discourage because they're only going to answer the ones that are appropriate. Thank you for that. Consultation, the committee you worked with, did they give any opinions? Should it be in the short or long survey? Because everybody that came here said short. So did you ask for any opinion on that? The committee expert.
One, they know exactly what we were testing, the different versions of the questionnaire. They know that we've tested it on in different ways.
Did they express one preferred over the other, short survey or long survey?
One, it's not. I mean, that's not part of their.
Okay,
that's not their mandate.
I appreciate that, yeah. But everybody that came here said short. You also admitted that the short survey is because your exact facts. You know that everything about it because everybody receives it, which is important. So if my colleague said 3,000 households in a community and only 100 households in that community is French, is it possible you wouldn't touch one of the 100 if you're only giving it to 75% to 25%? Is it possible? Not probable, but is it possible that you only have 100 out of 3,000? Is it possible nobody in the 100 gets it? Yes or no?
The answer is no.
It's not possible.
It's not possible.
It's not possible.
Through the statistical sampling, the way that it works, so what we do, I've explained it, so we take the list of addresses in a geography, there's a random number start, and every fourth household after that gets it.
Yes, but is it possible that none of the 100 will get it?
Our statistical, over 50 years of sampling,
is it possible,
we have never
is it possible it's less than 5, like 4,
Voilà.
3, which doesn't...
As I've explained.
Yeah. Merci.
This is
Thank you.
You're not going to get exact
merci.
stats.
Le temps est écoulé.
Okay, thank you. Time is up. Thank you, Mr. Aurora. Mr. Beaulieu, 2 minutes, please. I find, on the one hand, you could at least give us the different theories for and against. I'm going to try and give you a chance to fill in the answer regarding the ethnic origins. When you added the category of Canadian, this was a question on people's origins. But then you added in the word Canadian. Since that category has been added, of course, everyone can answer Canadian, but we can't find out what their genealogy is, what the cumulative effects on Francophone or Acadian communities are, and the wrongs that have been done. Firstly, this is not a category that we added. As I said, that was an example of, it was part of a question that was asked. Canadians gave the answer Canadian because it was a fill in the blank. The question was, you are, and the Canadians filled in the blank and said Canadian. There was a study carried out specifically on this aspect of ethnicity. We can share the report and its results with you if that is something you're interested in. Perfect. I want to come back quickly to rights holders. You said that the results of your tests will be made public before you refer them to the cabinet. No, I said it will become public after the cabinet's decision. As I said, the aspects will be part of the recommendation, but the report will be published after the decision. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Beaulieu and Mr. Aurora. The last 2 minutes are for Mr. Duval.
And thanks, Mr. Rohr. I got to ask, I need to ask this question. So just hypothetically, we're going to go and get a census here. I'm going to go to every fourth person. Are you a Canadian? Were you born in Canada? That'll be the question. So you're telling me that I'm going to get a great quality data just by asking 3 out of these 12 people?
If you go to 3.7 million households in Canada and ask them that question, and you have the statistical rigor and the expertise to be able to weight that up to a population and be able to benchmark it to the fact that we've asked that question for the last so many censuses, yeah, you will. You will get a very good answer. The one that you can repeat over and over again with a different sample, and we can actually tell you the difference in the variability between one sample and the next sample. That's what we do. That's what we do all the time.
Okay, I thank you for that, but I must have went to the wrong school because I look at everybody's vote. That's how I get the senses of what the people are actually voting on or what they're saying by asking each individual. I don't get it by skipping every 3 people. That's for sure. We'll never get a census out of that. But what would be the consequences of putting only on the short form or the long form only? missing one or the other.
Well, I've explained before, if you put it on the short form, you are subjecting, notwithstanding the point that was made earlier about reduction of burden, a response from a number of, obviously, those that are pertinent to that. On the long form, same thing. You have now there are questions of cost, there are questions of burden, and there are some quality issues that can also, by the way, enter just because you put it on the short questionnaire and administered to all Canadians. There are non-sampling errors, if you like, that start to creep in because some people may not understand the question and may give you a what's called a false positive or a false negative. So, administrating it on the short form doesn't always guarantee you that you're going to get a better estimation. You could actually start to you could get responses from people that maybe don't understand what they're saying. So our statistical methods benchmark for those kinds of things. We have post-census studies that actually adjust for those kinds of things. We just want
to make sure all the people
Monsieur Duval.
Mr. Duval, thank you. Time is up. But look, in the report on the enumeration of right holders, and for this sitting, I would like to thank you, Mr. Aurora, for having come here, as well as Ms. Bartelford and Mr. Dufour, and dear colleagues. And we are now going to suspend for a few minutes and begin the meeting again after.
Bye.